Hey there, I'm Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, and I'm here to give you my July reading wrap up. Month of July I read 11 books, and the theme for this month is if I didn't buddy read it, did I actually read it? So I'm not even going to break you in easy here, I'm just going to go straight for it and get it over with. The first book that I finished in the month was Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and this book is a huge brick of over 800 pages. To finish this tome, it took me 2 buddy reading groups. So shout out to the most patient and wonderful buddy readers. My Instagram group, which consisted of Lucy from Lucy Rowan, Emily, and also Manira from A Touch of Starlight blog, and then we've got my booktuber friends who also read this with me, and those people are Jade from Jaded Reader and Soleil from The Little Reader's Corner. So Priory of the Orange Tree. In this one we are in the kingdom of Innis, which is run by this queen, Queen Sabran, and Queen Sabran has been ruling peacefully for many years, and she's been secretly protected by Eoin, who is someone with some powerful magic who's watching over her, and the kingdom and the kingdoms around it have a lot of tensions that are beginning to rise, while there is also an enemy, the Nameless One, who seems to be possibly on the rise as well. The truth of the matter is I didn't like this book. In the beginning I started to think I liked it. I thought I was getting BBC Merlin and Arthur vibes from Eoin and Sabran. We do have an FF romance in this one, so that is a good thing, but for me it just was incredibly slow paced. We get a lot of politics and a lot of backstory that we entirely do not need. We did not need that much backstory of each and every individual characters. We did not need that much politics and not enough of any action happening. There is one major action scene at the end, but it's so short and it takes so long for us to get there. I legit mean 700 pages to get there, that it's not worth my time, and by then I was just too far gone. We follow a lot of characters, some I didn't like, some I didn't not like, but I didn't feel anything for, and my lack of emotions, the passivity I felt while I was reading this book just ruined the experience for me. It was just not exciting, it was not interesting. I was looking forward to a sapphic romance, but the romance just didn't even do it for me enough. It was just kind of randomly thrown in at moments. So I feel like this book was just too much dialogue, too much information, too much info dumping. I needed plot, I needed depth of character, I needed more understanding for character motivations, I needed less subplots that didn't really amount to much. This book was over 800 pages, and for something so big I just expected so much more. So this was definitely my biggest disappointment of this month, and not one I recommend at all really, but if you're really into heavy world building and politics, maybe this could be up your alley. Also, side note, this was pitched to me as very feminist, but I didn't get very feminist vibes from it. We do have more female characters and more female focus than usual, but it took a lot longer for it to feel as feminist as I wanted it to be, or I assumed it would be from what it was pitched to me as. The next book I read was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this was a 5-star new favourite read. This one we follow these 2 girls who live in 2 different places. One lives in America and one lives in DR, the Dominican Republic, and they don't know that they have a father in common until a plane crash happens where their father was on that plane, and they realise that they might have a sister. I'm going to leave all of the content warnings for all of the books that I read this month in the description box below, as I do every single month, just putting a reminder out there if you're new here. Clap When You Land, that premise is the premise, but there's so much more to it. We also have an FF romance happening as a little side thing, and what can I say about this book? Elizabeth Acevedo's writing has just been fine, pointed and perfected over time. This novel in verse was absolutely beautiful to read. I love the way that she uses and takes advantage of the novel in verse formats to bring across these emotions all the more. Grief is at the forefront of this book, and we get to see both of these girls grieving in different ways, and I like how it explores how grief can look differently for different people. We've got some beautiful descriptions of the Dominican Republic, but also about the differences living in America and living in the Dominican Republic, as we get the 2 girls' point of view and how their lives are different depending on where they are. I like how their lives kind of echoed each other, and it showed how their lives were similar but also indescribably different at the same time. Their attitudes to each other and how they experienced and handled their complex family dynamic and situation as they discover more and more felt utterly realistic to me, and I'll always be grateful to Elizabeth Acevedo and also Andrew Thomas for bringing to the forefront family dynamics and complex family relationships that are different from the family norms that we see in a lot of fiction. What more can I say other than this book was absolutely fantastic, and I really recommend it, and we love to see black girls on the cover of books. Then I read The City of Brass, and this was a buddy read with Nicole from Who Picked This Book. I really enjoyed buddy reading with her and we had a blast with this book. This one follows Nari, and she lives in Egypt, Cairo, where she kind of thieves and cheats for her own living, and one day she does this ritual to earn some money, but she calls forth more than she bargained for, and she ends up going on an adventure into another world that she never knew existed. It was so good. I think I need to read more desert fantasy books, but this one was just so fun. It was really creative, which is what I didn't expect. You also get to see some of the religious practices and religion in this fantasy world being based off of the Muslim religion, so it's also nice to see that representation in a fantasy book. I really liked Nari as our main character, but we've also got some other perspectives that are brought into this book and other male characters such as Dara and Ali, and I think it did a very good job with them. This one has some themes and discussions about privilege and poverty and how different roles of power mean you can have access to different things, and it's talking about what is the right thing to do in situations like that. It has a lot to do with history and how history affects the present day, but all of this is underlined in a fantasy kind of setting. We are seeing a royal family as well, so you get to see some of the politics of this royal family manipulating people and working towards their own gain. I love the characters, I love the complexity of the characters and how you see that nobody is unbiased and nobody is perfect. They all have flaws, but their relationships to each other and how they interact with each other was A+ and stellar and brilliantly done. The only thing I'll say about this book is that I thought the plot was gonna get going at one point, but it doesn't quite get going. It still reads very much as a first book in a series, but it promises a lot of things that are going to be exciting and interesting. The ending of this book especially left me with some cliffhangers and some exciting information that has me so eager to pick up the sequel. Next up we have one of the reads that I read for All the World's a Page, and that is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I buddy read this with Laura from The Chronic Bookworm over on Instagram, and we had a lot of fun with this. I rated this book 5 stars. It's another new favourite. So this is a dark academia book where we follow these Shakespeare theatre students who are in their final year of university and are working towards their final performance. However, this friends group has a very unique dynamic, and one thing leads to another and one thing leads to another. The perspective that we get in this is Oliver, who's in prison, and he is talking to a detective about what happened to end up with him there. Wow, this book was fantastic. But if you do like Shakespeare's plays, this kind of the prose is still contemporary prose, but sometimes reads a little bit like a Shakespeare play. The book is set in acts and scenes, so it has that Shakespeare element to it. We've got characters who fit the roles that many characters play in Shakespeare's plays, and a plot that could very well have been a Shakespeare play as well. We also have these prestigious university students who are in love with Shakespeare's work and kind of quote it in their conversations. So you've got that aspect of the Shakespeare side of things, but it's also a dark academia thriller kind of read where we know a crime has been committed and we get to see the lead up towards that crime and then why Oliver ends up in prison. I thought it was so interesting because the friendship dynamic in this one is so complex and so twisted. They are all kind of horrible people, but also very human people, and the way they're just all entirely too close to each other. I really loved some of the characters. I really loved James as a character. I really loved Oliver as a character. Oliver is so smart, but at the same time so oblivious. I definitely related to different elements of James and Oliver, but Philippa was also someone who absolutely stole my heart and kind of stole the show for me. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away, and while I think the ending is not as unpredictable as it could be, I also think it's unpredictable in some other ways. It went somewhere I didn't expect it to go at the end. All in all, if you love Shakespeare, you're probably gonna love this, but if you love dark academia and you've not read any Shakespeare plays, I also think you could really enjoy this book. The next book I read is The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant, and I buddy read this with Raquel from Raquel Baggins. I did say when I unboxed this in my Illumicrate unboxing that I wanted to read it next because it was so beautiful, and I did that. So this one is a Les Mis retelling set in this fantasy world, and we follow this girl whose sister gets sold into the Court of Miracles. There's different guilds in these courts, and her sister gets sold into the Court of Flesh, and she decides that she's going to rescue her, but in order to do that she might have to sell out her other sister, and she has to choose between them. I thought this book was just okay. It disappointed me a little bit. And how do I put this in a way that's understandable? There's absolutely nothing wrong with this book. There's nothing that I didn't like. The plot is still there, the characters are there, the world building is there. However, I think all of it lacked the depth that would have made this a great book. I didn't feel anything for the characters, I didn't feel anything for the plot. I feel like some elements of the plot were just solved a little bit too easily and were just resolved so easily that I didn't feel any of the suspense and the drama that you feel because the stakes are just not high enough. And as for the world building, it was there, it was present. I could see the elements of the Les Mis retelling. We've got the revolution happening, but it still just wasn't enough for me to feel fully immersed. So while this book brought everything that it promised to bring to the table, it didn't bring it to the table in a way where I could connect and really feel and get emotionally connected to this story. I feel like overall it was just surface level. I would kind of recommend this to people who are beginning in the fantasy genre and kind of easing their way in, rather than people who have read a lot of fantasy and want to sink deeper. After that, I read When Life Gives You Mangoes by Kereen, Getten, and I buddy read this one with Gavin from How to Train Your Gavin, and I really did enjoy reading this one. There's not that much that I can tell you without giving the game away, but we follow this girl who lives in Jamaica. This is a middle grade book, and she can't remember anything that happened last summer. And when a girl moves to Jamaica from England called Rudy and they start to become friends, she slowly starts to remember more and more as a storm is brewing in Jamaica. I really love this. I love this for a number of reasons. First one being that I read a book set in Jamaica. I haven't read a book set in Jamaica before, but it made me miss Jamaica so much. I loved seeing ackee saltfish and guinnep mentioned in this book. Those are foods that I never really get to see mentioned in the literature that I'm reading. I thought it did a very good job of portraying believable child characters and some of the frustrations that the child feels about parents like talking over her and talking about her as if she's not there or not understanding her, or when they play imaginary games. Those all felt like very realistic children things to do. The first half of the book felt a little bit slow paced, but it's working its way up to a brilliant plot twist, and you just have to hang in there. It's not too long of a read, so if you hang in there, it's going to be worth that wait, it's going to be worth the time that you invested. And by the end of this book, I was incredibly satisfied with the way that this book went and what it discussed and what it talked about. It handles a theme that I really love, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to give you any spoilers. Just trust me, read this one and let me know what you think. This one comes out in October 2020, so you should be pre-ordering it and looking forward to reading it too. Then I'm going to talk about Artemis, Fowl and the Opal Deception. This is the fourth book in the Artemis Fowl series, and I buddy read this with Gaia from Gaia Athena. We've been buddy reading the whole series together, and all I can say is that I absolutely head over heels loved this book. It was another new favourite. I had 3 5-stars this month. How fantastic. This one blew me away, but I don't want to tell you anything about it because I don't want to give you any spoilers. So I'll tell you about the first book in the series in the hopes that you go and pick that one up, which is a heist story. We follow Artemis Fowl, who's a 12-year-old criminal, and he hears about this fairy world that exists and he believes it exists, and if you kidnap a fairy they have to give you the ransom gold, and he decides he wants that ransom gold. In this one, so much has happened since the first book, but the author has yet again managed to raise the stakes and raise the excitement. They were put into a situation that I did not believe that they were going to come out on top of, so every time that I put this book down it physically hurt me because I needed to turn the pages, I needed to know what happened next. I wanted all of my characters to be okay. It was a struggle, it was an emotional struggle, there was some emotional turmoil in this one. I love all of these characters, I just realised how much I love all of them, the whole lot, and I love their relationships to each other. Something happens in the third book in the series which changes up the relationship dynamic that these characters have between each other, and then in this one you get to see the effect of that and how it works into the story. I also really like that the author always gives time to just mention some really nice things. He talks about animal abuse, he talks about the environment and littering, he talks about sexism in the work community. He effortlessly weaves this into the story, so it's not like preaching at the child, but it's just a little bit of a mention here and there, so you do get some good ideals that I think it's good for children to take note of and be aware of. It's just so much fun plot-wise, such great characters, brilliant world building. He's always adding to the world as you get further into the books. What can I say except that I loved it and you should be reading this series. Then I read Eclipse by Stephenie Meyer, and I'm not going to talk about this too much. I'm reading this for my Read It Backwards series. This is the third one in the Twilight Saga, and I'll have a link up there and down below so that you can go and hear all of my thoughts on this book. I did enjoy it. If you watch that video you get to hear about Hangry Edward and what he does when he's hangry. You get to hear about why I dislike Jacob so much. You get to hear about why the side characters are infinitely the best thing in this series, and also about plot versus character backstory. That's all waiting for you if you go and watch that video. And then last but not least we have the 3 Shakespeare plays that I read for All the World's a Page, and I'm not going to hold up this complete Shakespeare collection because it's very heavy. So the first one I read was King John, and that's because history plays aren't usually my jam, and one of the challenges was to read from a genre of Shakespeare play that you don't usually read from. However, King John was an okay play. It's very military focused, it's about King John, and it was just okay. I don't really have that much to say about it other than there was enough action to keep it interesting, but I didn't particularly care for any of the characters, so I didn't feel a deeper connection to this one, and it doesn't drive home any big themes, and I'm a very thematic reader when it comes to Shakespeare, so for me that was just okay. The second one that I read was King Henry IV Part 2, and I really enjoyed this. I'm incredibly biased because I liked King Henry IV Part 1, and my favourite character in that was Falstaff, and we get to see a lot more of Falstaff in this one. He is absolutely hilarious, and he's sassy, and he's a drama queen, so I absolutely loved getting to see more of Falstaff. I did also like the friendship aspect of the first one, and you get to see how that friendship develops in this one too. My biggest problem with King Henry IV Part 2 is that it felt a bit repetitive. It's almost like the character development that happened in the first part was undone so that we could get to see that character development happen again in the second part, which we didn't necessarily need. I was talking to Ken from Reinhardt Reads, he just changed his Instagram username, and he mentioned how it would have been infinitely better if part 1 and part 2 of this play were made into one play, and I actually agree with that. I think that would have been fantastic, and he could have cut out some of the repetition. And last but not least, the last play that I read on the last day of the month was Julius Caesar. I entirely read Julius Caesar because that was one of the main plays mentioned in If We Were Villains that I hadn't read. It was in fact the only mentioned play that I hadn't read. So I was like, I need to read Julius Caesar, and I absolutely loved reading this one. I'm again biased because A, I just read If We Were Villains and it got me hyped up for this one. I also already like the Julius Caesar story, and we get to see Mark Antony in this one. If you've read Antony and Cleopatra, you'll know that Mark Antony is this emotional man who challenges preconceived ideas of masculinity in Shakespeare plays. So we get to see him be emotional, we get to see him be feminine, and he is exactly the same way in this play, so I loved getting to see him again and see him be his fantastic self. I really like this play because of the theme of loyalty and betrayal when it comes to friendship, and you get to see 2 characters who kind of embody those elements and how they interact and deal with the situation here. Loved all of the politics, loved all of the drama and backstabbing. I'm here for it. It was so much fun to read, and I was incredibly satisfied by the time I finished reading this play. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite read of the month in July, or have you read any of the books that I mentioned here. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior. What is it about? What does it tell you that it's about? Because I don't even know what this book was about.